This video looks at the top 12 submissions from the first judo tournament of the year on the IJF World Tour. So the Portugal Grand Prix featured plenty of sankaku-jime, so I know a lot of the frequent commenters on this channel are going to enjoy this one. Opening one starts off with a turn into sankaku-jime. Before she can get her opponent completely turned, she decides to switch to juji-gatame, and it really does look like something popped. Just look how much extension there is on that arm. And then eventually there was a sudden tap. The girl in blue's covering her mouth, the girl in white's covering the elbow. I'm sure there was a trip to the doctors straight after that one. Now Rodriguez of Venezuela certainly has some new tricks in the bag this year. I don't think anybody's going to be extending that arm for a handshake. Two great Seoi otoshis into juji-gatame. Here is Jemima Yeats-Brown. So Yeats-Brown pulled off one of the submissions of the tournament here and started off with that low ochigari. Now she's looking to set up the reverse triangle choke, the ushiro sankaku-jime. So she's got the sankaku-jime locked on sideways and she rotates her opponent onto her back, and the referee is quite slow to call the osai-komi count. He hasn't even started the count right now, and Jemima Brown's lifting her hips off the mat, supporting herself with her right hand, and finally the referee calls for osai-komi, and that seems to inspire the girl in blue to tap out, but it's just too late for her. As she tapped, she must have slipped straight into unconsciousness, and took a little bit of time for doctors to move into action. And yet another KO win for Jemima Yeats-Brown. She's been on the receiving end of a couple of KOs in judo in the past, and she's dished out a couple too. Next we have Tanzer of Austria, who pulled off a nice ude-garami. So she's looking to either get to tate shiho-gatame or take the ude-garami. She can't get the leg out, so she decides to crank on the arm instead. And this was an interesting one. The girl in blue dropped in for the Seoi otoshi, popped back to her feet, and then Podolak just dropped in for that juji-gatame. And here's a nice choke by Esteves. Here we have another juji-gatame, another low ochigari, and she takes the arm as the girl tries to get to turtle, and she's able to lock down that shoulder and finish with the juji-gatame. Now we have another Rodriguez. This is the Spanish Rodriguez. The one you saw earlier was the Venezuelan Rodriguez. And this time it's Rodriguez on the receiving end of a choke. And the Portuguese girl does an interesting job of using her shin behind the head to get to this choke. It's often I see people using the same hand and shin. For example, the left hand and left shin over the head. But in this case, she's opted for the left hand with the right shin over the top, and eventually it's enough to get a submission. And there's another counter to Seoi otoshi. Went straight in for the juji-gatame. And Costa, the number one seed for the 48 kilo class. Don't think she walked away with the gold, but she picked up a nice choke there. Next we have a very nice juji-gatame entry. So there's a kata-guruma by the Portuguese girl. She's able to get behind her opponent. She gets control of the left arm, steps all the way across, had a bit of airtime. I guess you could call it a Toby juji-gatame, a flying armbar. And eventually was able to extend the arm and get the submission win. And she did some damage as well. So the final clip for this video is another sankaku-gatame. You see the Austrian girl get behind her opponent. Looked like initially she was trying to set up a standard sankaku-gatame turnover, but decided to go for the reverse triangle. And once again we see an opponent flipped onto their backs from this position, and she uses her hand for support and lifts her hips off the mat to drive pressure into the back of her opponent's head, forcing her into the choke.